Hey, Ando here from Happy Life Martial Arts. So I had a chance to sit down the other day with MMA coach Ramsey Dewey. Now, if you've looked up any topic about the martial arts on YouTube, you've probably seen Ramsey Dewey. You'll probably also remember his thoughtful, knowledgeable, and seductive style. That's why I know you're going to love this interview. Let's get to it. Mr. Ramsey Dewey, thank you for being here, sir.
All right. Thank you for having me on your channel.
It's an honor. I tell you, congratulations on all the success on your YouTube channel. I don't think there's one subject I can type in to YouTube, martial arts subject, without your face popping up. So congratulations on just being so prolific. How do you do it?
Oh, man. I answer people's questions for the most part. I don't put up a lot of filters when I do this. People send me questions about all kinds of things. Sometimes it's questions they're embarrassed about. Sometimes it's questions about life advice. Sometimes it's just silly questions like, who would win in a fight, this comic book character or this real person? And I'm like, okay, let's take these questions seriously. It was my channel wasn't always popular. In fact, for the most of the time I've been on YouTube, it hasn't. I mean, for 13 years, I started my YouTube channel way back when YouTube was brand new, and had maybe 1,000 people watching my channel and maybe 2 or 3 commenting. And that's how it was for most of the time. And I decided, anytime somebody sent me a sincere question, I would answer it. And so, I got some silly questions. I got some more serious questions, but I always made it a point to answer them seriously, in a way that I would want to hear and answer. And that resonated with people. And somehow my channel in the last couple of years went from 1,000 subscribers to 140 something and counting, which it blows my mind. But as far as subject matter, yeah, if you pay attention to the audience, they're going to have a ton of questions to you or for you. And I suppose as far as covering all these topics, that's how it works, man.
Awesome. Well, it's wonderful. You're so generous with your time and your energy to help so many people. I think that's fantastic. So good for you, sir. I hope that continues for a long time. Show is Fight for a Happy Life. So I like to always ask people, how do you define a happy life, and how's your fight going?
I often say life is a fight, because my job description, as I would describe it, I coach cage fighters, basically. I mean, that's my day job. Not YouTube, but coaching cage fighters. And so I describe it as, my job is to coach fighters to win fights. But a lot of the people I interact with, a lot of the people who come to my gym to take classes, for example, they are not cage fighters. They have no interest to become a professional fighter. And that's okay. They still have a fight, and I still have a job. And that job is still coach them to win a fight. What's that fight, my friend? It's life. Life is a fight. And that doesn't necessarily mean that life is always going to be hard and difficult and throwing veritable punches in your face. It is a pursuit of happiness, isn't it? Right. I would say, to me, something I recognized pretty early on was that happiness is not like it's not like an amusement park ride where it's constant thrills, it's a constant high. It's not. Life isn't like that. Life is sometimes, actually a lot of the time, life is pretty mundane. It's normal. There's not a lot going on. There's a lot of introspection. Once in a while there'll be like this I don't know, fascinating burst of speed, like the roller coaster, where it's like, this is great, this is awesome. But those are rare occasions. And if we go about life, trying to chase that thrill all the time, thinking that's happiness, that thing over there, if I have that, I'm going to be happy. We're going to be sorely disappointed most of the time. So there are different levels of things I've found in life that can add to happiness. And the first thing I think most people, after they get their basic needs met, they look for the acquisition of stuff and things, right? If I have that toy over there, that'll bring me some happiness. And to an extent, that's true until we get our fill of that, if you will. We'll never get a fill of that. We'll never get enough of stuff and things. I mean, it's just our nature. But then there's this other step. Once we realize, yes, stuff and things has a limited amount of happiness it's bringing me, we start looking for experiences. I'm going to go on this vacation. I'm going to travel. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And that's fun and it's fulfilling to an extent. And then we start looking for more. Where's the real happiness, right? And so what happens next? We start looking for self-improvement. Like, I'm going to make myself better. I'm going to take a martial arts class. I'm going to learn to be a public speaker. I'm going to do this. I'm going to train in the ancient Japanese art of origami, something like that. And we improve ourselves. And it's really easy to kind of lose yourself in self-improvement forever, basically. And especially for martial artists, if you're being honest about what it is, because you can see constantly that you're not the best guy in the world. There's always somebody better than you. And always somebody, even the stupidest guy in the room has something to teach you if you're humble enough to see it. So we can get lost on self-improvement forever, but there are other steps. And then this next one is so interesting when we realize that giving back, which if we have accrued stuff and things and experiences and self-improvement, we're in a great position to give back. And then that starts to open up all of these doors and windows to happiness that we never really may have considered before, especially if it's all about me, asking how do I become happy? Anyway, so
that's a great answer. I love that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your flow. That was a great answer. Yeah.
No.
How your personal search for happiness dovetails into helping other people, and then your happiness actually expands from their improvement. So that's your circle here from being a student of martial arts to a teacher of martial arts, and then endlessly looping back to being a student again, and then teaching what you know. And so you're gratifying yourself in many ways, but then you help other people make themselves happy. It's this beautiful little me, you, and then that way you have this whole yin yang experience. Is that fair? That's kind of what you said, right?
That's pretty much it. There's probably some level that transcends that, but I don't think I'm there yet.
Have you pleased God? So. You must please your God.
There you go.
So if I may, let me take that answer. And as a teacher, I find myself asking people this question all the time, whether it's a trainer, physical trainer, or a martial arts specific coach. It seems to me that when you take any group of people and they come to you, they're paying you money, they're spending their time, and they say they want this, that, they want to be a champ, or they just want to get in shape. But then by and large, most people seem to hold themselves back. They don't really give them 100% to what they're doing. You could say, pick that up, and you can see they're not trying that hard. Or you can say, don't give up, but they give up, and they kind of let themselves off the hook a lot. One, do you find that true? And if so, what do you think the fundamental issue is with human beings that they hold themselves back from pursuing their full happiness and then sharing it with others? What do you think about that?
I think a lot of times people say they want one thing, but what they actually want is often something different. Like in my experience, a lot of people come to me and they say, I want to be a professional fighter. I want to fight in the UFC. I want to go all the way. And often the first time they take a punch in the face, they're like, nope, never mind. That's not what I want. And, cage fighting is pragmatic in that sense because, it teaches you that lesson pretty quickly about what you actually want. But then people can fall into the trap of combat addiction and get addicted to the thrill, the adrenaline of getting punched in the face, even if they suck, basically. And not to say they can't and shouldn't and will improve, but that's a layered question. Let me see if I can unpack that a little more. But as far as the average person, right, an average person who wants self-improvement, they'll come to me, they'll say, I want to lose some weight. Can you train me? Can I join your classes? Can I do a personal training session? Because this is my goal. I want to build some muscle. I want to do this. I want to do that. Okay, generally to those people, I'll have them get a notebook, like an actual pen and paper physical notebook. And they'll argue with me then, say, oh, but my phone, my digital schedule, all of this stuff. And I'll say, I want you to physically participate in the act of writing down your goals, for example. And I want you to physically put these goals where you see them the first thing in the morning, where you see them the first thing before you go to bed, in your own handwriting, with your own signature. Right? Because you got to own these goals. It's not just enough to say, coach, here's some money, now make it happen, like I'm some magic genie. A lot of people have that idea, you know, especially in a big city like this in Shanghai, where there's a lot, materialism is a big thing here. A lot of materialistic people who have a lot of disposable income, and they make a lot of their problems in life go away by throwing money at it. And that's unfortunate, because as far as physical culture, physical discipline, especially as far as martial arts goes, you can't buy it with money. You have to earn it. And it's this lesson I've tried to teach over and over again. But when you asked that question, the first person I thought about was the student I had named Roy Swan. I've told his story a few times on my channel. I'll paraphrase it here. He was a Chinese guy, and he was fat, like pretty fat guy, which is kind of rare because they're like per capita, very few obese people in China. And he was a video game programmer by trade, and he just finished a project, so he had like 6 months of free time on his hands before his next project. So he thought, I'm going to do some self-improvement. I'm going to take a martial arts class. I'm going to learn English. As he signed up for my class, he's like, I'll learn English because this class is taught in English, and I will learn martial arts and maybe lose some weight. And on the first day of the class, we're doing a simple warm-up, just like rotating the arms, you know, dynamic stretches to get the synovial fluid going and all that. And when we got to this move, just rotating the shoulders, you know, like simple basic warm-up, he's heaving, he's out of breath, he's like, like he's dying. He's like, I'm sorry, I can't continue. And I thought, oh man, that's too bad. This guy's done. If he can't do that, he's probably never coming back. But he comes back the next day. And I'm like, oh, he came back. What's going on here? And he made it about a minute further through the warm-up, just the warm-up. Again, nothing strenuous by any stretch of the imagination, but he came back the next day, did a little bit more. He came back the next day, did a little bit more. He came back for 2 years and did a little bit more each and every time. He ended up being an amateur fighter. You know, won like a dozen boxing matches, 17 kickboxing matches, 2 MMA fights. And he had that thing that fighters always talk about, heart. You know, everybody talks about heart. Like Rocky in the movies has heart because he gets punched in the face a lot and he keeps coming back. But it's more than that. It's different than just a willingness to absorb damage. It's not being a damage sponge. It is a willingness to, as Jack Dempsey put it, a champion is a man who gets up when he can't. And what was different about Roy, I remember one day he was sparring with one of my pro fighters. This guy who was really technically good, highly athletic, but he didn't have heart. And it's funny how in this one body, this one obese, physically unfit body, there's the heart of a champion, and then this other guy, the body of an athlete. Man, is a quitter. It's like, man, did we put the wrong parts in the wrong people? What's going on here? But at the same time, man, our limitations are gifts. Like Roy's limitation was a gift. Because man, what he learned there was so much more valuable than simply being gifted athletic ability, because he earned it. But the average person isn't like that. You know, as you said, most people, they come into the gym, they say one thing, I want this. Like, I want the result. I don't want the journey. But man, you got to show them the journey. You got to show them the path, if you will. There was a boxing coach, I forget his name, but he was kind of notorious for anytime somebody would come in the gym and say, I want to be a fighter, the first thing he would do, boom, he'd punch them straight in the nose. Then he would say, do you still want to be a fighter? And if they did, he'd take them in. But again, most people would walk straight back out the door again. Now, I'm not necessarily recommending that we do that, but we do need to be honest about what kind of business we are in.
Okay, well, let's talk about the business that you're in. Did I hear you say that you were the first person to open a public MMA gym in China?
In Shanghai.
In Shanghai.
But I was the second one to open a public MMA gym in China.
Congratulations. I can't even imagine how you do something like that in China. So good for you for pushing through and figuring that out. That's fantastic.
Oh, man, it was, I'll tell you, man, it was weird because nobody knew what MMA was. There were like literally a handful of people, like literally, not figuratively, literally a handful of people. I could count them on my fingers who knew what MMA was in this whole country. And I remember one day I was so frustrated because nobody knew what it was that I wanted to do. And I saw this Chinese guy wearing a tap out shirt. And before I came to China, I remember guys wearing tap out shirts were, I don't know, just kind of had this reputation of being like, what's the word I'm looking for?
Posers.
No, yeah, exactly. Like, those are posers, exactly. But I saw this guy in a tap out shirt and I ran up to him. I was like, you know what MMA is? And he was like, yeah, you know what MMA is? And we were like, we're just jumping up and down like, hooray, we've met somebody who understands. But yeah, when I opened up that first gym, it was weird because again, it's like trying to sell ice in the Arctic Circle. You know, people are just like, why? What's this for? Not that there's an overabundance, but because people just don't understand the need. There was no market for it. And trying to explain what it was, like, is it like boxing? Is it like wrestling? Like, yeah, but it's more. It's different. Sure. They're like, but why? Why do we need that?
Did I hear you refer to it? Did I hear you say in one of your videos that over there they refer to MMA as American Kung Fu?
I have heard that a number of times. Now, the technical term for MMA in Chinese is 综合格斗, which means integrated combat. If you translate that literally, integrated combat, which is, I think the translation actually sounds cooler than MMA, to be honest, mixed martial arts. Because that's kind of a confusing term. If you listen to John McCarthy, the referee, talk about the history of the term mixed martial arts, he was filling out paperwork with the New Jersey State Athletic Commission, I think it was. And they needed him to write the name of the type of sport that it was. And he wrote martial arts, like it's a martial arts competition. And they said, what kind of martial arts? And he was like, mixed martial arts, just off the top of his head, wrote that. And the name stuck. But integrated combat. But yes, American Kung Fu. And that was confusing to me at first. I remember having this conversation about martial arts probably 10, 11 years ago, shortly after I'd arrived in Shanghai. And they were talking about, these people said, show us some of your Kung Fu. I was like, I'm not a Kung Fu practitioner. You know, I do, you know, boxing and Muay Thai and Taekwondo and Jiu-Jitsu and, you know, MMA, mixed martial arts. And they're like, well, you know, it's American Kung Fu. It's like American Kung Fu, 美国 Kung Fu, you know, as opposed to 中国 Kung Fu, Chinese Kung Fu. And there was a Muay Thai gym that I worked at for some time, the Tiger Muay Thai Kung Fu Club, which translated that's translated directly from Chinese Kung Fu Club. More specifically, Muay Thai Kung Fu, or Tai Chuan Kung Fu. Which sounds weird in English, but that's how a lot of people said, like Thai martial arts is Thai Kung Fu. American martial arts is American Kung Fu. Chinese martial arts is Chinese Kung Fu. As opposed to in English, we say Kung Fu, we think strictly Chinese martial arts.
Right.
But yeah, not how it is in China.
And if I may, in terms of integrating and mixing martial arts, your resume is so impressive. I'm going to hope everybody goes to your website, checks out your extensive credentials. It's incredible, which either means you're a huge liar or Well,
I don't know how extensive or incredible they are, but
I think it's pretty
I've
incredible.
practiced a lot of different martial arts.
So let me ask.
Anytime I see something interesting, I'm like, I got to add that to my
Sure. Yeah, you
game.
got the bug. Yeah, you got it. What after all that competition experience and teaching experience and bending the knee to learn at so many people's feet, what is there? Where are you going now? Are you just going deeper with what you have, or are you still a junkie for new information? Do you really think there are still areas that you have not explored yet? I mean, where's the future for you? Where are you going?
Oh man, there is no limit to the areas that haven't been explored. Like one thing I'm super interested right now is Tai Chi, Tai Chi Chuan, specifically the combative applications of it. And one of my big hobbies is translating forms. And almost any martial art, a lot of combat sports also have forms, and a lot of people don't recognize it. Like if you look at a speed bag, for example, there are a lot of different reasons to work a speed bag, but there are also techniques in that movement. There is trapping, there is hand fighting, there is framing, there is blocking. Like most of it isn't actually punching. Like a lot of people say, well, you don't box like this. That's not punching. It's not punching. That's a lot of other stuff that can and does happen in a fight. But again, most of it isn't punching. So I'm a huge fan of translating forms like that. And again, Tai Chi is something I'm really interested in.
I love hearing you say that because I have great respect for these arts that get mocked. That's pretty much what I'm doubling down on for the rest of my life to prove that the old guys weren't crazy. And I love your term, if I may tell you, that this term of shadow grappling. I thought that was a brilliant term. I love that term for not just for Tai Chi, but start with Tai Chi's. What a wonderful, that says everything right there, right?
Everybody needs to do more of that. Anybody who takes themselves seriously as a grappler, as a mixed martial artist, as a martial artist in general, needs to do more shadow wrestling or shadow grappling. I mean, wrestlers do it all the time. Everybody knows about shadow boxing. Everybody's seen shadow boxing. Most people have done shadow boxing at some point or another. But shadow wrestling, it's a much more cerebral approach because you can't just randomly flail around. You have to actually visualize the fight, which is what you should be doing in shadow boxing to get the most out of it. But you have to have this, extreme amounts of context. Like you actually have to know the techniques in order to shadow wrestle. Whereas somebody might just, stick their hand out and be like, look, I'm shadow boxing, and have no context for how footwork works, no context for a position or anything like that.
Sure.
But yeah, Tai Chi Chuan, I had this experience over a decade ago. I met this Tai Chi master named Wu Dao Shui in Jiangsu province. And I've told this story a few times on my YouTube channel, and a lot of people type in the comments, we don't believe you, that's crazy, because they're romanticizing the story, because they've seen these kung fu movies where there's an old master who can fly through the trees and do magic and shoot fireballs, and it's nothing like that. What he did was grappling. And suddenly, when I sparred with him, I sparred with this guy, and a gentleman who was 80 years old at the time, significantly smaller than me, but strong. Like very, very physically strong. I mean, he was able to do backflips, handsprings, all kinds of gymnastic movement, which was incredible. Great flexibility. He could hold his leg up over his head in the splits and all this stuff. And when I sparred with him, he was able to slip punches. Like he stood there like in a parallel stance, which shocked me. Like, why would you ever stand in a parallel stance? And I learned as soon as I laid hands on him, because it's a grappling stance, because it's a wrestling stance, because that's what he intended to do. He was going to grapple me, which he did. As soon as I laid hands on him, oh man, he knew exactly what to do with that. And for anybody, again, romanticizing this idea that it's about magic or something, I'd recommend, there are a few videos on YouTube you can see of like elderly wrestling coaches from Russia just kicking butt all over the place, throwing their giant students around and moving really, really well. Because most people haven't seen physically fit elderly people.
Right.
Like in so many cultures in the US, for example, when people get old, you kind of put them away, put them in a nursing home. All right, you don't have to move anymore. You don't have to live anymore. And China's different. China's way different. If you walk around in the morning, early in the morning, all the old people are awake, and they're walking around, and they're doing exercise, and they're ballroom dancing, they're doing Tai Chi. it's not crazy amounts of exercise. They're not doing high intensity intervals, but they're moving and they never stop moving. And there's so much value to that. So after this Tai Chi master kicked my butt, and he tossed me around, put me on joint locks, wrist locks, shoulder locks, all of this other stuff, and which was funny because I was like tapping out, and he's like, "There's no tapping out in Tai Chi." Apparently, he didn't know what that was. He just keeps cranking. I'm like, just stop. And finally, let's go. And so after this, I was so impressed. I asked him, "How long did it take you to master this art?" And he laughed and he said, "About 80 years." I was like, "Wait, you're 80 years old?" And he said, "Yep." I was like, "Okay, I get it. A lifetime of practice. Like you're never done with it, basically."
Right.
So anytime I see like a young guy saying, "I'm a master of anything," I'm like,
you punch him in the nose.
yeah, man.
Well, may I ask, so in this experience, when you crossed hands, as they say, with the Tai Chi fellow, many people might be thinking right away, like, was he combating you with internal principles, external principles? Did he just feel like an old Russian wrestler, or was there something going on? I don't want to use the C word, chi, but did you feel that there was anything going on that you couldn't explain with just hard old school drilling, the way Dan Gable still might do, and still when you grab hold of these old crusty wrestlers or some old GI, and they can still just tear your head off? Or was there a sophistication to this movement that you thought was really different and therefore worthwhile getting onto that training path? I'm presuming there was something there that was different from what you would normally be able to explain.
Okay, well, it definitely wasn't magic.
Right.
If anybody's wondering, there's no magic involved in this. Like this was the result of hard work, a different type of hard work. But a lot of people, I think there's a ton of confusion about internal martial arts, internal energy, chi, all of this stuff. I mean, chi just means air or breath or even gas in Chinese. And it's the idea of connecting breath to movement. If we relate that word to martial arts, like most martial arts have a principle like this, like the kiai in Taekwondo or karate, where you shout "ha" when you move to expel the breath to ensure that you're breathing. Because we have conscious control when we are in a hyperventilating state over exhaling, but not over inhaling. And if we do not consciously control the exhale, then we end up hyperventilating in a very negative way. So what I mean by that, if you fight, if you spar, you start breathing heavy, your heart starts racing, you demand more oxygen, basically. So if you're in a boxing match, for example, anytime you throw a punch, you exhale when you throw those punches. And you don't have to think about breathing in. Your body does that automatically when you're hyperventilating, when you're breathing heavily. But you do have to focus on breathing out so that you can keep going, right? So that's a perfect example of chi, if you will, like real chi, not magic power, but just air, gas, breath, in the most literal translation of the word. But yeah, I've had some pretty screwy comments from guys who believe, kung fu is magic, basically. Talk about, well, this is clearly a story about internal principles. I had a conversation with Chung Xie. He's one of Zhang Wei Li's trainers. He specializes in the foot and Tai Chi and myofascial strength. And we had this super interesting conversation. Unfortunately, it didn't get recorded. His microphone died and my camera had some issues and the audio didn't get recorded, but super interesting conversation about Tai Chi and its value for Zhang Wei Li's training. Now, you watch her UFC fight, she's punching and kicking and shooting for double legs and things like that aren't part of the syllabus of Tai Chi forms. But she trains in Tai Chi Chuan on a regular basis. And the reasoning for that, and I don't want to put words in his mouth because, his understanding of the science is phenomenal, super, super smart guy. But essentially, the reason for that is there is a great deal of benefit you can get in spite of the forms, basically. Whether you are using, for example, there's this movement where you go like this, where if you transcribe that movement and you stomp your foot, it's an arm drag, like a wrestling arm drag, where you bring somebody down to set up a sweep or a takedown or take their back or something like that. But if you watch the way the people practice it in the park in the morning in China, they do it very, very slowly. And there are a few different reasons for that. One, so everybody can follow along because it's slow, like slow motion lion dancing. So if you don't know the forms, you can still follow. But also, so you can train what basically your myofascial tissue. There's a term in Chinese, which is like a silk of spider web of tissue, something like that, which is an ancient term. But as Chong Xie pointed out, it is directly, essentially, it is what the myofascial tissue is. It's a network of threads, if you will, that connect your how can I put this, your body in the most athletic in the most athletic ways possible. Mm-hmm. Something he pointed out was like this massive amount, like 60, 70, some huge percentage of the mass of the glutes, for example, the biggest muscle group in the body is actually myofascial tissue. It's fascia. And I was like, it's not like lean skeletal muscle, but fascia. Mm. And so moving slowly like that, like you do in Tai Chi, if you are moving very slowly as if you were forcing yourself through very heavy air, as opposed to simply putting your hands and feet in the right place, trains the fascia in ways that, for example, weightlifting doesn't. And I don't mean to poo-poo weightlifting, not at all, because it's something I do and I advocate, and everybody should do squats and deadlifts and pull-ups and all that. But the attention to the details, the tissue in between the tissue is man, it's a fascinating science. And one thing they proved with Zhang Wei Li, like scientifically, they measured her punching power. So before she started working with Chong Xie, her punching power was like, I don't remember how exactly they were measuring it, but something like 350 pounds per square inch of pressure on the device they were using. And after focusing on fascia training, they got that up to like almost double. Wow. Which was quite impressive that you can actually improve punching power through this grappling art, essentially. Mm-hmm. I mean, Tai Chi, it's principally grappling, but in the context of striking. Because, in ancient times, nobody really separated, okay, now we're going to just grapple, now we're just going to just strike, it was a fight.
Integrated combat from the beginning.
Yes, a fight was always integrated combat.
Right.
If there's a weapon, there's a weapon. If there's not, there's not. If we're grappling, we're grappling. If we're kicking, we're kicking, right?
Right.
But, at some point we just artificially divided everything into all these different aspects. Like in Taekwondo, we only kick. In boxing, we only punch. In Judo, we only throw and pin. In Jiu-Jitsu, we control and submit. Right, and those are all important aspects of martial arts, but connecting the web, man, that's
easier for sport for sure. So you can catch, because as that 80-year-old man's journey proves, it takes a very long time to be good at all of the skill sets of integrated combat. So in a sports setting, where you can just focus on boxing punches or just focus on primarily kicking nowadays with Taekwondo, it gives young people a chance to get really good at one thing really fast, so you can get your medals, and then you're burned out, and then you're done, late 20s, early 30s. But then the whole rest of the art is lost. And then in the meantime, fans get caught up in thinking, well, that's the best kicker in the world. And they don't see what they don't know. They don't see what's not being thrown. And they think that's all there is. That's the best style, because look at how great those kickers are. No, wait, that's the best style. Look how great their punches are. No, wait, that's the best style, because that's how great their grappling is. And they miss the ancient wisdom of just like, hey, man, it's a fight. You got to be prepared for everything. And if you want to be good at all that stuff, it's going to take a lifetime. It's just a hard grind. So I think that's fantastic that Tai Chi, have your fans been surprised that you speak so highly of Tai Chi? Is this something that hits the MMA?
Yeah, a lot of them do, especially because of that Chinese guy, Xu Xiaodong, and his run-ins with some basically fakers. And I think his mission, are you familiar with Xu Xiaodong? Chinese MMA fighter. He had a gym, I think he was up in Beijing, and he had a little internet spat with this guy who was claimed to be a master of Tai Chi. He was like 30 years old, something like that, claiming to be a master of Tai Chi. And they challenged each other to a fight. They go to this gym. The MMA fighter beats up the fake Tai Chi guy, and the internet goes crazy, and everybody's like, see, this is proof that Kung Fu sucks and Tai Chi is nonsense and nobody should ever do it ever and ever. Amen, basically. But if you listen to what Shu Xiaodong actually says, he is on a mission to expose fake martial arts. Like, he's not on a mission to say, Tai Chi has no redeeming value. Kung Fu has no redeeming value. He's out there to expose the fakers. And it got so grossly misinterpreted by everybody, by Western audiences, by the Chinese government, by everybody who saw this message and just saw, MMA versus Kung Fu, as opposed to, here's a guy who actually trains, knows how to punch people in the face, and here's a guy who pretends to do magic tricks. Yeah, and so a lot of my viewers, they're like, what, an MMA guy who thinks Tai Chi actually works? And I like to break down some of the movements. I did this demo for a kindergarten a couple of years ago, and I filmed it, put it up on the YouTube channel, where I'm showing some there should be a word for bunkai in English. Do we even have that? Where you have the karate forms, then you explain this is the practical application of the karate form. But basically doing that with Tai Chi. I said, those Tai Chi forms your grandparents do in the park in the morning. Well, here are some ways to use that in an actual fight. So I showed them some sweeps and some arm drags and catching kicks and some single leg takedowns and things like that. And it's really basic wrestling movement. So what happened to Tai Chi is so sad and so weird. It would be like if people just forgot what freestyle, Greco-Roman wrestling was, or folk style, any of the modern forms of wrestling, if people just forgot what they were, but remembered the name and remembered the uniform, and if 100 years from now you had guys or old people in the park wearing singlets out there doing shadow wrestling, talking about how, okay, this movement represents invisible magic mystic chi power or something like that. That's exactly what happened to Tai Chi. It's this predominantly grappling art in the context of striking that has become romanticized into something it was never meant to be. But again, there's also more to Tai Chi. There's Tai Chi Chuan, which is the unarmed combat form, and then there's Tai Chi Jin, the sword form, which I think less people in the West are familiar with. But you'll also see the old people in the park with their swords moving around very slowly doing these sword forms. And yeah, I think anybody who sticks around and listens and watches the demos that I do, they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. They're not like making an invisible chi ball in their hands to throw a Hadouken fireball. It's like catching a kick. That makes so much sense now. Okay. Because that's happened with almost every traditional martial art that has forms. Sure. Like I was grappling with one of the wrestling coaches at my gym when I first met him, and we tie up. I get a collar tie. I grab his wrist. I'm trying to switch down here and set up an arm drag. And as soon as I grab his wrist, he strips my grip with this movement that looks exactly the same as a low block from karate. And I grab his wrist again, and poof, he pulls one hand to the hip as he strips the grip with the other hand up here. And I'm like, whoa, time out. Do that again. And he does it again. I'm like, that's a low block from karate. And he's like, that's wrestling. That's, just basic stripping the grip. And I've used tons of different methods to strip grips, but I'd never seen that one before. It was like, you're doing karate. He's like, that's wrestling. That's karate. And suddenly it made so much sense why you pull that one hand back to the hip, because everyone's like, you would never do that in a boxing match. Well, of course not, because you're not wrestling. Right. But again, a great deal of the forms, especially the movement that doesn't look like boxing or kicking or punching, generally that stuff is grappling. Right. And that's a fairly universal constant through most traditional martial arts forms. When it doesn't look like punching and kicking, it's usually not. Right. And even when it does look like punching and kicking, it's usually not. Because I would say, look, if you're going to punch, you go punch. You don't need a form to remind you, like, okay, well, this is how you punch someone in the face. Like, that's not the wisdom of the masters being handed down in these very manicured movements with very specific corrections.
just punch. You want to go punch, go punch. You want to go kick. That like babies can do that. But it's the sophisticated more techniques of like, oh, well, here's how you take an arm, and here's how you take a neck, and here's what you can do, and a flip and a throw and a sweep. That stuff you need to kind of have a textbook and go, okay, well, how do you unbalance somebody, and what's the angle, and now these details make sense. Not to underestimate how sophisticated striking can be, but in the air, striking that's not no. You need a heavy bag or a partner, and that's for your striking practice. And I agree. I think everything else that you see in traditional arts is all shadow grappling, which is you're the first person I heard actually say that term. So that's why I love that term very, very much.
And what's beautiful about the forms that I think most people don't appreciate is that they help to give you context for shadow grappling that you may not have had before. Because if you tell the average person, do a round of shadow wrestling, they're just lost. They don't know what to do. They have no clue. You tell them to shadow box, at least they'll move their arms and legs around and work up a sweat.
Right.
But the forms, even if you don't know how to wrestle, if you don't know what grappling is, you can still go through the movements, you can memorize some movement patterns, and when you learn grappling later on, you can have all these little light bulb moments like, oh yeah, that's stripping a grip, or oh yeah, that's a Russian 2-on-1 right there.
Yeah.
That inside middle block. Very, very similar technique when you apply it like that.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, man, I love dissecting forms like that, which again shocks a lot of people because they just assume that there's this rift, this dichotomy between traditional martial arts on one side and MMA on the other side, and they just don't get along, and you can't play on the other side, and that's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense.
Bloody fools.
Yes, absolute fools. Yeah. Look at any successful MMA fighter, like any of them. I guarantee, most of them, I shouldn't say any, because there are exceptions. There's always an exception. Most of them have a background in at least one traditional martial art, at least. I mean, look at any champion with a meaningful career in the UFC. Like name any one of them. Name a fighter. Go ahead.
Me? Well, Anderson Silva.
Yeah,
let's go back.
Name a UFC fighter.
Anderson Silva, I'll go.
Anderson Silva. Okay. How many traditional martial arts has that man trained in? Like all of them. He has black belts in judo, jiu-jitsu, he taekwondo, he's capoeira, what else? Wing Chun. You name it, he's dabbled in it.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, who else? Like any successful MMA fighter you can name. Israel Adesanya, I mean, that guy has traditional martial arts backgrounds. Ballet as well, man. That shocks a lot of people, like dance and martial arts. That's crazy. Those are different things. I have
that written down here. You have a degree in modern dance. Is that correct?
I do. I have a degree in modern dance.
That's right.
And I actually danced professionally with a few ballet and modern companies over the years.
So serious dance, not just...
Serious dancing, yes.
Okay.
And man, that's not something I had a natural gift or inclination for. I didn't do it because it came easy to me. I did it specifically because it was hard. And I decided, you know what? I want to challenge myself. I want to push myself. I felt like I was kinesthetically retarded. It was very difficult for me to move, basically, to move intelligently. And that's a level of intelligence. Everybody associates intelligence with cognitive reasoning, with the mind, with math and logic and science and things like that. But there's so much more than that. There's emotional intelligence, the ability to communicate and understand. There is kinesthetic bodily intelligence, which is how to interact with the physical universe with your own body. And if you don't have that, I mean, even the dumbest animals out there have a high degree of kinesthetic bodily intelligence. But there are so many humans out there, so many of us who just throw that in the garbage and sit on the couch and eat potato chips all day and stare at screens constantly, and we don't live in our bodies anymore, so many of us.
Don't judge me.
I'm just trying to subtly push you in the right direction, Ando. Settle down, man. Right.
There's one more huge question I wanted to ask in our brief emails back and forth to set this up today. You did use this phrase here. You set up this thing about, based on all these experiences you've had, that you're at a point in your life now where you wanted to, let's see if I get the quote right, where you felt you wanted to, challenging conventional wisdom in martial arts and combat sports training. Challenging conventional wisdom. Now, I don't know if you're just talking about stretching or conditioning or the way training methods are done or how arts are integrated or you work with kids, you work with adults, so you've seen everything from every angle. You've studied so many arts. What are you thinking about? How are you going to challenge wisdom?
You could challenge conventional wisdom anytime, any place it's offered, but especially in terms of training, because training in martial arts tends to be incredibly dogmatic. And not just traditional martial arts where it's supposed to be dogmatic because you are upholding tradition. That's literally in the name. I mean, you have to teach the forms exactly the way they are, or it's not that martial art, right? Let's talk about combat sports dogmatism for a minute. Skipping rope and boxing. Every boxer out there knows they're supposed to skip rope, right? Now, that's conventional wisdom. You skip rope for an hour every day. That's what you're supposed to do. Fighters have done it for 100 years. Why change now, right? So a while back, Faraz Zahabi, famous MMA coach of George St. Pierre, he put out this video where he challenged that conventional wisdom. He said, skipping rope is junk training. It's garbage. You don't need to do it. You don't need to skip rope for an hour a day to be a good fighter. And the internet blew up a little bit around that for a while as far as the martial arts community, the boxing community, the MMA community, like, what? No, how dare you say that? How dare you suggest that? Skipping rope is our sacred cow. We have done it. Our fathers before us have done it. You have to do it. Muhammad Ali did it. You know, Joe Frazier did it. Everybody did it. Okay? And here's Faraz Zahabi saying you don't need to skip rope every day to be a good fighter. And this is just an example. There are so many examples of junk training. And let's dissect that for a moment. Just the skipping rope. Skipping rope is not bad for you. Skipping rope has a lot of benefits. Skipping rope can certainly help fighters be better. But the assertion, you don't need to skip rope an hour a day to be a good fighter, is objectively true, especially when we take context into consideration. What he suggested, that instead of doing this one repetitive task over and over again that does not teach you an additional skill set, replace that with something more effective, and then you will have a more effective training session. For example, if you are deficient in grappling, spend that extra hour grappling as opposed to skipping more rope, and then you'll be a better fighter. If you're deficient in kickboxing, spend that additional hour kickboxing instead of skipping rope, and then you'll be a better fighter. So pay attention to what you need. Program your training more intelligently as opposed to blindly following tradition because it's always been that way. And I made a video a while back that got a lot of angry responses. Most of my videos have mostly positive feedback, but this one in particular got a lot of negativity, like mostly negative feedback, mostly dislikes. And I'm okay with that because I stand by my message. It's titled, "Punching with Weights is Stupid." And a lot of people, even a lot of high-level professionals like Floyd Mayweather, for example, they punch with weights as part of their training. And my assertion in this video was, you don't need to do that to be a good fighter. And I gave some examples. If you're holding a weight out in your hands, essentially what's happening, trying to do this, is the weight's dragging your arm down, and then the muscles in your shoulder are activating differently than they would be if you're actually throwing a punch. And so you're training something else that isn't punching. And also you're squeezing onto that weight, which prevents you from activating your fist, going from loose to tight as you would in an actual fight. And so you're training a mechanical process that is very different than punching. And so you may be getting some physical benefits from moving a weight around, because lifting weights is good for you, moving weight around is good for you, resistance is good for you. But this exercise is not translating into actual performance the way you think it is. So combat sports, especially right now, are very much in the realm of bro science. If you look at a lot of other sports, not all, but a lot of other sports like baseball, for example, man, Major League Baseball teams invest heavily into scientific analysis of pitching, for example. They want to get that down to a science so they can recognize these tiny little cues so that they can score as many points as possible so they can win and make millions of dollars, because there's a lot of money on the line. Every tiny little advantage in these sports makes makes these teams great deals of money. And so it's in their best interest to be as scientifically accurate to measure everything that they can. But MMA, boxing, kickboxing, all these combat sports, it's bro science right now. Very few people are measuring anything scientifically. Very few people are analyzing fight data scientifically. And so when somebody comes along and says, all right, here's some actual science confirming that, let's say, for example, skipping rope for an hour a day doesn't actually make you a better boxer, as opposed to, say, this other activity, which does increase your punching power or your endurance or your ability to stick and move or whatever it is, it's met with antagonism. No, you're challenging our tradition. It's like telling, I don't know, like telling people to switch religions. And you get some antagonistic responses to that. I mean, I spent 2 years as an LDS missionary back at age 19. I went down to Argentina, and I actually had that experience. You go to the door, you knock on the door, you don't say anything, and people are like, "Get out of here! I got my religion. I don't need yours." Right? They don't need to hear the message. They have their mind made up about it, right? And that makes sense. That makes sense as far as religion goes, but as far as martial arts, where it should be scientific, where you should look at it from what will give us the best result to win this fight. Again, people are lost in the dogma. So, man, I got to ask you, how, as a martial arts trainer, what kind of dogmas have you seen seep into training that people have had a difficult time letting go of?
See, I'm like I said, I'm doubling down on the dogmatic stuff once you figure out what it's for. So what I'm against are the people who are dogmatic against the dogma. So for instance, sitting in a horse stance, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. There's no practical use for that. It's like, okay, well, you keep thinking that. And on and on. Long fist techniques from Choi Li Foot or Northern Shaolin. I mean, just go on and on. The list of things that all get made fun of and disparaged, the hand on the hip. There's so much there. And I grant that. Is it really our fault that these things have been lost in the wind, and that the Cultural Revolution and so many things have destroyed that bond between what was so good about that stuff, and that really is the wisdom of generation after generation being passed down, and there is something special about it. And then it got broken. And is it really worth our time to kind of keep dusting this stuff off and trying to find the meaning and apply meaning, when you could just as easily start, unfortunately, reinventing the wheel, just kind of double down on your training and figure out what works for you. And then eventually, but I do believe you're going to end up in the same places they ended up in. Because I think I'm on a rant, sorry. Now, it's so easy to think about, well, fighting has evolved. Fighting is different now. Fighting has changed. It's not like the old days. And I want to punch everyone in the face who says that, because it's like, oh, really? Because have you killed a pig recently for your dinner? Do you go out and slaughter your own animals? I mean, the cultures that came before us were so much more attuned to killing and being killed, and the diseases and just warfare and the turmoil that the world history has been through. We're in a relatively peaceful period. We don't have to kill our own meat. We don't have to hunt so much if you don't want to. It's recreational. Back then it was survival. And that same applies for warfare. There was a time before the gunpowder, they were legitimately running into the field with axes and clubs and spears and swords and hacking people up. And to then look at all of those hundreds of years of warfare, thousands of years, and say, they didn't know what they were doing. Fighting's evolved. It's better now. Everyone's smarter now. It's like, are you out of your mind? You're dead. Whatever. I don't care who you are. Give the other guy a knife. Give the other guy a spear. Give the other guy a sword. Give him a club. Give him an axe. Give him anything. And they'll go out into the field, pretend you're defending your village. You're dead, son. I don't care what you got your belt in. So anyway, okay, now you got me going. So let's keep it down to the horse stance. I'm against the people who are against the dogma before they at least ask the question, well, what was it really for? And I grant that many people will give you dumb answers to that question, and that's where we get into this trouble. And then you throw the baby away with the bathwater, and you don't realize, well, wait, but you just talked to someone who didn't know. If you talk to someone like yourself who says, take another look at Tai Chi, it's shadow grappling, that one idea should open up so much for so many people. And when you take some good collegiate wrestlers or some wrestling coaches, when they look at it and go, oh yeah, or pay a wrestling coach. I would tell anyone to do that. Pay a wrestling coach to sit with you and watch a Tai Chi session and see what they see. Then go take a Sambo guy or judo guy and say, watch this Tai Chi guy with me, because they're going slow enough. We can all analyze it while we're watching. What do you see? And that's it. You'll say, oh, well, that's clearly that's a leg sweep. Oh, and that's a little hip throw. That's a little variation on a hip throw. Oh, and you do that with all those traditional forms, and you'll find so much gold in there. And I do think it's worth it. And I can't remember what the original question was. What dogma do? So I went the other way.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
And that's a really interesting topic you brought up about how folks in the modern world tend to poo-poo anything from the past. It's what the Romans called damnatio memoriam, the damnation of memory, where they would literally like chisel the names off the monuments of the people who came before because they're not as good as us, basically. And we do that all the time, man. We do that all the time. It's this idea that anybody who came before us couldn't have possibly been as good as us. I love to dabble in this idea of the possibility of advanced ancient civilizations. And anytime I say this, people are like, that's crazy. But I mean, what if, I mean, how long have humans been on this planet? According to most scientists, a very long time. A very long time, hundreds of thousands of years, we've had modern humans on this planet with the same capacity to reason, to think, to develop tools, and so on. And so why is it, just in the last 100 years, we went from the horse and buggy era to the space age, to think that nobody else ever in the history of ever has come up with any significant developments that got lost with the ebb and flow of time. I mean, that's just kind of absurd to think about. And fighting, man, fighting. Especially when you bring it in the context of warfare. One of the first things I thought of when you were talking about fighting was the art of killing, and how some cultures just got that down to a science, like the Romans and the Zulu specifically. Like as far as melee combat, oh man, because they realized it is a physical process, but it's also a psychological one. And that's something a lot of people fail to understand today, is the psychology of fighting. Something that set the Romans and the Zulu apart was that they had a short-range stabbing weapon. The Zulus had a hand spear about that long, and the Romans had a short sword about the same long, the gladius. And you know, when the Romans went to war against the Celts in the Punic Wars, the Celts had these big, long, giant swords the length of a human body, and the Romans kicked their butts. And why is that? You have to understand the psychology behind it. The Celts had this psychology of, they go to war, they battle, they swing these big, intimidating looking swords at each other until people get scared and run away, and maybe they inflict some slash wounds, which are not nearly as fatal as stab wounds. Stab wounds, on the other hand, which is the only type of wound you can inflict with the Roman short sword or with the Zulu spear, the Zulu short spear, those are nearly fatal almost every time. So the Romans and the Zulu went to war to kill specifically, whereas, say, the Celts, the Gauls, they went to war to intimidate. And that's a whole different psychology. When you have those two armies go against each other, the killers are the ones that win. And so when you bring that same psychology to sport, like combat sports, again, the ones who understand the killology, if you will, the science of, I mean, you're not killing each other in a cage fight, but if you go into it with that mindset of, I'm going to finish the fight, as opposed to, simply being an intimidating presence here in the cage, those are the guys who more consistently win. So, man, there is a ton of stuff you can learn from the past. And one of my favorite books, On Killing by Dave Grossman. Have you read that one?
I have not. I'm writing it down right now.
Oh man, so fascinating. It is a book on killology, a term he coined. This former lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army did a study on like all the mortality statistics of like every war the U.S. has ever been involved in, and how the military has basically improved kill rates. Because way back when, like, people just didn't want to fight. It's the natural human instinct. I don't want to shoot anybody. They'll shoot over the head. They will pretend to fire, and so on. And yeah, it's a fascinating study. And technically, it has nothing to do with MMA. But I read this book, and I had all these revelations. Like, this has everything to do with MMA. This has everything to do with combat sports, everything to do with unarmed martial arts, even though you're not killing anyone.
Forgive me. Is that the book? Maybe I'm a little getting older now. Was that the book where they kind of explained the transition from one, buddy systems where people wouldn't kill for themselves, but they would fight for their team or their fellow troop. So they started like having like the idea of smaller groups that would know each other to fight for each other, and they also started changing the training drills to have actual dummies that represented people instead of just hay bales or something. It was actually like the silhouettes of people, so that you could actually envision killing a human being to get them over that psychological hurdle.
Just like changing the target from a bullseye to a human-shaped target.
Right.
Brought the kill percentages way up. And then there's one guy like filled cabbages with ketchup and made dummies with them, and so they could see the heads explode when they were practicing sniper rifles. Yeah. Again, that brought the kill percentages up.
Do you do that in your MMA gym, or do you have a bunch of cabbages that you've filled with ketchup? I think Mike Tyson used to do that. His bad intentions.
I should try that sometime.
I think so.
Get some grappling dummies, fill them with ketchup, so that you hit them, they bleed. No, but yeah, the fascinating thing about jiu-jitsu in particular, out of all martial arts, is essentially when you train jiu-jitsu, it's like simulating a fight to the death. Nobody has to die, but essentially you are going to the death up until that point where there's that tap out, which is basically, okay, you got me, I'm dead now. And that's so fascinating if you stop and think about that from the killology standpoint of, going from the game of jiu-jitsu to the battle of jiu-jitsu, if you will. Which again, you can run into some very dogmatic people. Man, I made another video that made some people very angry, ruffled some feathers, where I said starting from the knees in jiu-jitsu is stupid. Because a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms do that. They're like, training takedowns is dangerous. We're going to start from our knees. I'm like, that's a position that doesn't exist in a fight. You don't kneel down and then fight. Like not even in a jiu-jitsu tournament. You start on the feet. You work for a takedown or somebody pulls guard. And if you always start from the feet, you're never going to develop the skill set to either take somebody down or pull guard if that's what you want to do in a tournament. You're going to be at a disadvantage. But this is something that is objectively true. It is. If you don't practice that skill set, you won't have that skill set. But it makes people mad. Yeah. Because they don't train that way. Right. Like, well, my coach that I love and respect taught me something else. And so I hate you because you told me something else, and it resonates with me. Sure. There wouldn't be that anger if they didn't feel that element of truth. So, man, challenge conventional wisdom. It will make people angry. Yeah. But they need to hear it.
That's your job, right? As a good teacher, that's your job. I think that's probably the best gift you can give your student. Give them the freedom to think for themselves. Let them explore the dogma, challenge the dogma. And hopefully if you're a good coach, whatever you're teaching as dogma turns out to be true. Like, hey, this actually turned out to be good. My coach was right. And then you've built trust with someone, I hope. And then thereby increase their happiness and thereby increasing your happiness. And then that brings us to our beautiful happy cycle right there. Wow. I wish I could just record this forever and ever. You are a fascinating guy. And what really blows me away is I only wonder how intelligent you were before you did all the competitive punching and kicking. You certainly took some headshots. I'm amazed at your level of thinkology, having been in combat sports so long. Is that just lucky, or you just keep your hands up, or have you lost some IQ points here?
Oh man, that's something I wondered about, because man, when I was fighting competitively, I'll be honest, I was not a very good fighter. Like when I was fighting professionally, I had a few good moments and I had some terrible ones, man. But I had a few fights where, man, I took some brain damage, man. And afterwards I thought, like, ooh, did I just forget fourth grade? My last fight, I got knocked out and I literally forgot the fight. So I'm in the locker room, my cornerman's there. I say, hey, how long until I get out there to fight? And he said, dude, sit down. You just got knocked out. I'm like, oh man, stop kidding around. When's my fight? How long do I have to warm up? He's like, seriously, you just got knocked out. There's a dent in your face because I got a skull fracture. And he holds up a mirror. I'm like, what? No, this isn't real. And it wasn't until like 2 days later, somebody came to the hospital showed me a video of the fight, I was like, oh wow, it really was in a fight.
Wow.
And I started remembering it backwards, like that movie Memento, you know, where the dude,
Wow.
it's played in reverse order. Spoiler alert there for an older movie. But yeah, I struggled with speech for a while because, you know, there was some damage to the frontal part of the brain, and so it was like I would try to make sounds and they wouldn't come out, or something else would come out. I was like, man, this I've heard about things like this. But that's one of the reasons I restarted my YouTube channel. Like I started 14 years ago, then there was like a 5-year hiatus where I didn't do anything on YouTube, mostly because of the Great Firewall of China. I didn't have a reliable VPN back then. And you can't access YouTube normally in China without a virtual private network. But I started making YouTube videos for a couple of things, to practice speaking, but also to practice memory, because I did that forgetting was traumatic to me. It was traumatic. Like I thought, man, all we really have are, looks like my kids are sneaking out here. All we really have are our experiences, our memories, you know, as far as what we're going through this life with. And this idea that you can get information like punched out of your head essentially is kind of frightening. And I thought, man, so I'm going to make these videos, and it helped me start to remember, and helped me start to articulate my thoughts again verbally, which is something I didn't really think about until you asked that question. So making these YouTube videos has been a tremendous help. You know, doing podcast long form interviews like this one has been a tremendous help in that regard as well.
We've only been rolling for 2 minutes. What are you talking about?
What? Oh man, I had this whole conversation in my head.
No, I think it's a beautiful, like when you were talking about your student Roy, this is a gift that you took that head trauma and that you found some type of healing through YouTube, and now it benefits so many people that you're sharing your experiences. So of course I hope that you're healthy and happy forever. On the other hand, I hope you keep getting hit and hurt so that you'll stay on YouTube and sharing what you're finding, because I think it's a great gift that you're getting.
I gotta say, I've become a lot better at avoiding strikes now after retirement than before, which is kind of unfortunate, because it gets in my head sometimes. Like I'll spar with these pro fighters that I'm training, and not to brag, but I'm pretty good at not getting hit in the face now. And I'll think, oh man, maybe I should compete again. Maybe I should try this again. And I'm like, maybe not. But it's always in the back of my mind, like, I could do this.
Sure.
But yeah, that was a point in my life where life just kind of said, Ramsey, it's time to go in a different direction at this point. And different can definitely be better.
Yeah, well, I hear you got the kids running around too. That's another reason to keep your head safe and be there for them, so you'll remember them and they'll remember you. That's I hope that's enough reason to stay healthy, my friend. My goodness. Thank you so much for being generous with your time. I'm really looking forward to getting this episode out. Is there anything you would like to leave people with, a final word of wisdom, or a way to contact you, or a way to, what do you need? How can we help now that people are listening?
Well, you can always contact me on my YouTube channel. People are always shocked when I respond to their comments. I read the comments. I mean, there are a lot of them, but I read as many of them as I can. I respond to as many of them as I can. People always ask me, how do we leave you questions for your Q&As? Just leave them in the comments. And yeah, man, so you can find me on YouTube. I do have an Instagram channel now, or what do we call those things? Instagram page, account, whatever that is now. So if you want to hit me up over there. Don't post very often, but it is a thing. What else? If you're here in Shanghai right now, I'm coaching at the UFL gym over on 2029 Huchuan Road. So come check us out, or email me at ramseydewey@gmail.com. Yeah, I'm going to put that out there. Hopefully the spam bots don't get me. How much
Chinese currency does it take to get you to dress up like Batman? And if I wanted a party, let's say.
Oh yeah,
I saw that on your website. How much does it cost to get Ramsey into a Batman suit?
That's negotiable, man.
Okay.
Yeah. I've actually been asked to do like kids' birthday parties, like in characters, like Batman or Spider-Man or something like that, and do like fight choreography. And man, I was kind of shocked when I first heard that. Somebody said, "Hey, can you come do like a ninja-themed birthday party for my kid, I was like, really? Like, yeah, just come do some martial arts, do some flippy kicks or something, break some boards. I was like, all right, sure. You're going to pay for that? Why not? And then that turned into like, do like a Spider-Man thing, do a Batman thing. And so, yeah, not something I do very often, but I have done it.
God bless you.
And
Spreading martial arts any way you can. I think it's fantastic.
yeah.
I'm going to start saving
So
up immediately.
that's negotiable. Save
Expect
up the
my
pennies,
request.
friends.
It's coming. I'm going to fly you over here for my birthday coming up. And I'm thinking Spider-Man. Maybe I didn't realize about the Spider-Man. Yeah, maybe Spider-Man.
Sweet.
All right. Well, thank you so much, sir. This has been a real pleasure. I hope our paths will cross again. I certainly would love to get over there to China sometime. So I'm going to start saving my pennies and make that happen.
But my final word of advice, as I always say at the end of all my videos, the most important thing, get out there and train. And for anybody thinking, I can't do that right now because, you know, the virus is out there and we have to stay inside, get out there. That's where you are. And if anybody thought to ask that question, drop and give me 50 push-ups right now, because that's getting out there and training.
Right on. Amen.